All right, just a little programming note. Tomorrow, our guest at the noonish briefing will be Lola Castro, the regional director of the World Food Program in Latin America and the Caribbean, who will brief us on the situation in Haiti, where she is now and just returning to Panama. Also, tomorrow, 1:15 in this room, there will be a hybrid briefing by Mr. Bilal Bhutto Zardari, the former foreign minister of Pakistan, accompanied by a high-level parliamentary delegation from that country. They will brief you on the recent developments in Southeast Asia. Let me turn first to a statement on Yemen. This June, we mark a grim milestone. It's been 1 year since the arbitrary detention of dozens of personnel from the United Nations, national and international NGOs, civil society organizations, and the diplomatic missions. These detentions by the Houthi de facto are being conducted by the Houthi de facto authorities in Yemen. The Secretary General renews his call for their immediate and unconditional release, including those held since 2021 and 2023, and most recently, detentions in January. He also reiterates his strongest condemnation of the death in detention of a World Food Program colleague that took place earlier this year. The Houthi de facto authorities have yet to provide an explanation for this deplorable tragedy, and he renews his call for an immediate, transparent, and thorough investigation and accountability. Mr. Guterres says he stands in solidarity with all detained colleagues in Yemen and their families and pays tribute to their essential work and their families' perseverance. We and our humanitarian partners should never be targeted, never be arrested, and never be detained while carrying out our mandates for the benefit of the people we serve. The continued arbitrary detention of our colleagues is a profound injustice against those who dedicate their lives to provide life-saving assistance and support to the people of Yemen. It has placed an additional constraint on our ability to operate effectively and undermine mediation process to secure a path towards peace. The Secretary General urges the Houthis yet again to immediately release all those arbitrarily detained, particularly on the occasion of Eid al-Adha. This is a time to show compassion. It is a time to end the ordeal of families who face celebrating yet another holiday without their loved ones. To our detained colleagues, the Secretary General wants them to know that they are not forgotten. We will continue to work through all possible channels to secure their safe and immediate release. He calls upon member states to continue expressing their solidarity with those detained and intensify advocacy for their release. Finally, we welcome the collective support of international partners, NGOs, and all those working to support the people of Yemen in these efforts. This morning, the Secretary General spoke at the General Assembly, where he congratulated Annalena Baerbock of Germany on her election as President of the General Assembly for the 80th session. He said that the President-elect Baerbock's vision of a better together is an inspiring rallying cry for today's world and the global problem-solving system embodied by the United Nations to address the challenges we face. He told President-elect Baerbock that she can count on his full support as she takes on this important responsibility. The Secretary General also thanked the current President of the General Assembly, Philemon Yang, for his leadership during the 79th session, which still has some ways to go. As we look ahead to the end of the 79th session and prepare for the start of the 80th, the Secretary General said, let us strive to live up to the values of solidarity and collaboration that have defined this organization from its very start. Our Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed is currently in Marrakesh in Morocco, where she's attending the Ibrahim Governance Weekend, which is, as you may know, a high-level gathering of African political and business leaders, civil society, multilateral organizations, and international partners focusing on financing Africa's development. While there, she's also meeting with senior Moroccan government officials and key stakeholders to discuss Africa's development priorities, the acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals, challenges to middle-income countries, and the implementation of the Pact for the Future. Tomorrow, she will travel to Geneva to participate in the 8th session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction 2025. It is the main global platform for reviewing progress and sharing good practices in reducing disaster risk and building resilience. Turning to Gaza, I can tell you that the Secretary General condemns the reported killings and injuries of Palestinians who were seeking aid in Gaza yesterday. It is unacceptable that Palestinians are risking their lives for food. The Secretary General calls for an immediate and independent investigation into these events and for perpetrators to be held accountable. Israel has a clear obligation under international humanitarian law to agree to and facilitate aid, humanitarian aid, the unimpeded entry of assistance at scale to meet the enormous needs of the people in Gaza must be restored immediately. The United Nations must be allowed to work in safety and security under conditions that fully respects our humanitarian principles. The Secretary General continues to call for an immediate, permanent, and sustained ceasefire. All hostages must be released immediately and unconditionally. This is the only path to ensuring security for all. There is no military solution to this conflict. And turning to the situation on the ground, I can tell you that our humanitarian colleagues there from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that in the last 2 days, partners reported scores of people killed and injured, apparently while gathering to receive supplies near the militarized distribution centers in Rafah and Deir al-Balah. Attacks against health facilities have also continued. Yesterday in North Gaza, the Noor al-Kabi Center for Dialysis was reportedly hit. The Ministry of Health in Gaza tells us that more than 40% of dialysis patients in Gaza have died since the escalation of hostilities in October 2023. This is because the centers were either struck or they are now unreachable. As hostilities continue, people have once again been forced to flee. On Saturday, Israeli authorities issued another displacement order in Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah. This has affected about 100,000 people living in more than 200 displacement sites. 2 primary health care centers and 5 medical points are within the displacement area, while these 3 hospitals and 3 field hospitals and 7 primary health care centers and 20 medical points are located within 1,000 meters of it. Overall, since March 18th, our humanitarian partners estimate that more than 640,000 people, that's nearly a third of Gaza's entire population, have been displaced across the Gaza Strip. The latest displacement order also deprived at least 8,000 students of learning as tens of functioning temporary learning spaces and dozens of public schools had to suspend their operations. These closures constitute a severe setback for children in education, limiting their access to a safe and structured living environment. The United Nations and our humanitarian partners will continue their efforts to identify and treat malnutrition wherever possible, even as dwindling supplies get even lower. Last week, we and our partners distributed supplements to about 40,000 children, despite severe challenges and restrictions on humanitarian assistance. Meanwhile, as people endure deprivation and hunger and the absence of adequate food distribution, as well as looting incidents continue to be reported. The vast majority of people taking flour directly from our open trucks out of clear desperation, but our teams are also observing criminal looting yet again. We and our partners continue to call for the full lifting of the restrictions on aid and other essentials to ensure that the needs of civilians are met. This comes as people continue to suffer but from frequent water shortages. The pipeline in Deir al-Balah, which has supplied at least 12,000 cubic meters of water every day, still not operational, and humanitarians' attempts to carry out coordinated missions to repair it have been denied. Today, 5 missions to distribute potable water in the displacement camps in Jabalia were also denied by Israeli authorities. Over the weekend, we and our partners kept working to bring supplies from the Palestinian side of Karim Shalom crossing into Gaza. More than 100 truckloads of food and medical supplies were picked up on Saturday and Sunday, bringing more than 300 the number of truckloads picked up from the Gaza side of Karim Shalom since it was reopened. Today, one of our attempts to collect supplies from that crossing was denied. Another is still ongoing, awaiting a green light from Israeli authorities, a pause in the bombing along the route, and the allocation of a viable path. Because of the Israeli weekend and holiday, the border was kept closed, blocking us from bringing more supplies from Israel through Karim Shalom since Saturday. When the crossing is open, even when the crossing is open, severe restrictions on what we can bring in, both in terms of volume and variety, means it's still just a trickle of what people actually need. And on a related note, Ms. Janine Hennis-Plachert, our special coordinator for Lebanon, began a visit to Israel today where she said to me with senior officials. Her visit is part of the regular consultations on steps to consolidate progress made since the November 2024 cessation of hostilities undertaking came into effect and to advance the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. And just to note that last week, the special coordinator, together with Geir Pedersen, our envoy for Syria, as you know, met with Lebanese officials, including President Joseph Aoun, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, and Speaker of Parliament Nabi Berri. They discussed, the discussion centered on ways to consolidate stability in Lebanon and the wider region through the implementation of Resolution 1701, including in relation to borders and issues of refugees. And to reiterate that we continue to call on all sides to abide by their commitments to create the necessary conditions for ensuring security and stability across the Blue Line. And I've also been asked about the acts of anti-Semitism we've seen over the weekend, specifically the horrific violent attack in Boulder, Colorado, and the acts of vandalism in France targeting Jewish landmarks. I can tell you that the Secretary General condemns these acts. The United Nations firmly stands against all forms of anti-Semitism, as well as other manifestations of extremism and any incident to religious hatred and violence, and he calls for swift action to hold those responsible accountable. Turning to Ukraine, our colleagues in the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that according to authorities, attacks over the weekend and today have killed more than 20 civilians and injured more than 100 others, including children. Civilian infrastructure, including homes, healthcare, and education facilities, as well as power and gas lines, were also damaged. The regions of Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kherson, Sumy, and Zaporizhzhia were among the hardest hit. Aid workers are providing support, delivering material for emergency repairs, along with psychological assistance to all those impacted. Humanitarian organizations are also continuing to evacuate people from areas of intense hostilities. Over the weekend, authorities announced evacuations from a dozen frontline communities in Sumy and Dnipro. On May 30th, an interagency humanitarian convoy delivered vital aid to residents of the frontline communities in Milviska, in the Kherson region. The assistance included solar lamps, charging stations, kitchen sets, and all sorts of other essential supplies. And this was for at least 700 people, including people with disabilities. This year, 11 convoys reached 16,000 people in the Kherson region, delivering much-needed aid to people remaining in frontline areas. Moving to Sudan, and I can tell you that we are alarmed by the recent wave of attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure in Sudan. On May 30th, El Daman International Hospital in Al Obeid, the state capital of North Kordofan, was struck in a reported drone attack that killed at least 6 health workers and injured more than 15 others. Just one day earlier, the World Food Programme's premises at Al Fasher came under repeated shelling, causing significant damage to a key humanitarian hub. Both attacks were reportedly carried out by the Rapid Support Forces. In a statement, the acting resident humanitarian coordinator for Sudan, Christine Humbrook, called for international humanitarian law to be respected. Civilian health workers and aid staff must never be targeted, she said. We reiterate that these facilities are essential to sustaining life in the face of a worsening humanitarian crisis. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that in Khartoum, attacks on electricity infrastructure have worsened water shortages, forcing many people to use unsafe sources and putting over 1 million children at the risk of waterborne diseases at a time when cholera is spreading in Sudan. Daily cases in Khartoum state have dropped compared to previous weeks thanks to efforts of health workers and community volunteers. However, the overall numbers there remain staggering, with more than 16,500 cases and over 340 reported deaths since the outbreak began. In South Darfur State, dozens of cholera cases emerged in Yala, the state capital, and surrounding areas, prompting officials to declare a health emergency. These officials are appealing for urgent support to contain the outbreak before it spreads. And in northern and River Nile states, cholera continues to spread, with over 200 cases and several deaths reporting since the middle of last month. Local health authorities, with our support, have set up treatment centers and launched surveillance and community health activities, but critical gaps in supplies, funding, and support for overstretched health workers remains. We and our partners are scaling up response, but being faced by mounting constraints with funding shortfalls. The movement of supplies and personnel across conflict lines remains obviously a fundamental challenge to our ability to do our work. We urge the international community to act swiftly so as to ensure resources reach people where they are most needed, to prevent the further spread of cholera, and to protect millions of civilians who are caught and are at risk. And from Nigeria, our colleagues at OCHA tell us that we and our humanitarian partners continue to support response to the devastating floods in the north and central part of that country. On May 29th, intense rainfall triggered floods in Mokwa local government area of Niger State. More than 500 households were impacted and over 3,000 people displaced. According to UNICEF, more than 1,600 children aged 12 and below have also been displaced. Hundreds of houses have been damaged. The flooding also damaged key roads and bridges, disrupting transport and local activities. The main needs include food, water, sanitation, hygiene services, emergency shelter, and psychosocial support. The government is leading the response, which includes food, water, and medical support. We and our partners are supporting the government. The WHO is preparing a shipment of medicine and medical equipment to support essential primary health care. For its part, IOM will provide tarpaulin sheets for temporary shelter and other essential non-food items, while the UNFPA plans to establish temporary clinics and safe spaces for women and girls, offering maternal and reproductive health services, psychosocial, and dignity kits. The agency is also working with the government to deploy midwives. Money today. 2 countries. Get your quiz hats on. This Central American country is a bird watcher's paradise, home to over 700 bird species. Just all of you are wrong so far. Its national bird is distinctive with red, blue, and yellow plumes, and it's called the scarlet macaw. Okay, you've named all of them except Honduras. Yeah, I do. You went. Well, you said Honduras earlier.
I said Honduras.
I think he said it before. Okay. Well, there's going to be a tiebreaker. There are 2 countries in the world that have national capitals named after a U.S. president. One is Washington and is the United States. What's the other one? What is the other country besides the United States? Liberia. Okay, there you go. We thank our friends in Monrovia and Tegucigalpa. And now we take your questions. Benno, I'll have to go to you. Or you lead. Okay, okay, go ahead, Edie. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of follow-ups. On the Secretary General's statement about the detention of UN and NGO staff by the Houthis, can we get some numbers? I mean, how many UN staffers, how many NGO staffers, and for how long? Because this has taken place over a period of time.
Exactly. So 23 UN personnel remain detained. And I will try to give you a better breakdown, but that's the number I have for UN staff. 23 remain detained.
Okay, and a second follow-up. On Gaza, you talked about the looting of trucks, new looting of trucks. Are there any numbers to go with that?
No, I don't have any granularity on that, unfortunately. Okay, Abdelhamid and then Gabriel.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have a couple of questions. I start with the statement of the Secretary General. He used the term appalled, and now you use the term condemned. So, in fact, I published this statement, and I used what he wrote, appalled. Now you say condemned. So, should I revise my statement, my report, and say the Secretary condemned?
Yeah, I mean, I speak on his behalf, and we clearly condemned what happened.
My second question. A Tunisian was shot and killed in southern France. And the killer, according to the prosecutor, is a hate crime. And last month also, a Malian was stabbed to death in a mosque. And we didn't hear a statement condemning these Islamophobic crimes. Why is that?
I mean,
do we pick and choose?
First of all, we condemn any acts of murder, especially those that are clearly motivated by religious hatred, whether it is anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, and that is our position.
I will be happy when I hear that statement coming from you in your briefing. And last, on Syria, Israel attacked Latakia and Tartus 2 days ago, and number of civilians were killed. I haven't heard any statement from any UN official on that.
I mean, these attacks, unfortunately, have been going on for quite some time, and I think we've been very clear in condemning all violations of Syria's territorial integrity. Deji, and then Dennis. Sorry, Gabriel. Sorry. Go ahead.
The new round of Russian-Ukrainian talk has concluded in Istanbul, and both parties agreed for a large prisoner swap as well as the missing children, I guess. Any reaction from the Secretary General on the latest development for the meetings?
Well, we obviously, we welcome these. We welcome any agreement that will bring exchange of prisoners or exchange of remains of prisoners. Gabriel.
Thanks, Steph. Ian Martin's strategic review of UNRWA, you mentioned weeks ago that it was still looking at mid-June, and will that be public, you think?
Let me get back to you on that. Yeah.
No problem. And on UN 80, where are we in the process there? I mean, we haven't heard from Guy Ryder. There's a lot that you know of potential changes in this organization. Where do we kind of stand on that?
The proposals are continuing to be looked at. Proposals are being harvested from the kind of 3 different tracks. We hope to get Guy Ryder down here at some point soon to update you. Dennis.
Thank you, Steph. I have a follow-up question on Ukraine. Could you comment on Russia's proposal that a peace treaty with Ukraine must be approved by a legally binding UN Security Council resolution?
Look, I think let's get to an agreement. I don't want to comment on hypotheticals. I think it would be unwise and counterproductive at this point. I do want to add that obviously we hope that the talks that concluded in Istanbul could lead to a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire as the first step towards a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in line with UN Charter, international law, and relevant UN resolutions. We'll go to Ria Novosti, please.
Thanks so much. Tom Fletcher is in Moscow. Any meetings, any readouts?
I know he met with Foreign Minister Lavrov and others. It's part of his broader consultations with all member states, but especially the permanent members of the Security Council. As soon as I have something, I will share it with you. Sinan, and then.
Thank you, Steph. In an April press release on the PKK-Turkey ceasefire, UN experts called for disarmament, which the PKK has since announced it will carry out. In the same press release, the experts also called for addressing the root causes of violence. So the question is, does the United Nations also call on Turkey to assess any possible responsibility it might have in the causes of the conflict?
Look,
And that was on the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, the press release.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the High Commissioner for Human Rights speaks for his mandate. We fully support, Secretary General supports him and his work. Let me go, sorry, yes, go ahead. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated today.
Okay, yes. What does the Secretary General expect from Turkey in the negotiations? I mean, does he has any? I know he's
Look,
not
I
involved.
think that there have been historic steps taken, right, between the government of Turkey and the PKK. We hope that these talks and these discussions will evolve in a way that is mutually beneficial to both, but also beneficial to all people in Turkey and the broader region.
I'm almost done. Is that all? You want to come back to me?
Go ahead.
Okay. So while the United Nations assistance has not been requested in the PKK-Turkey negotiation, has the SG offered the United Nations assistance to the parts?
We always stand ready to assist any negotiating process should the parties both want us and in ways that can be helpful. Stefano. And
thank you, Stéphane. First, from 1 to 10, how worried is the Secretary General about the Russian response to the attack yesterday could be a nuclear response?
We're not, first of all, I think the Secretary General's oft-stated position about the risk of nuclear conflict stands, but I'm not going to feed into number predictions.
But at least he says he's today more worried than he was, let's say,
Okay,
2 days ago. Another question he's a follow-up of the question I asked you last week about Mario Pachola's death in Colombia. You said that you were going to check because the question was if the UN is going to reopen the case with an inquiry or something.
Yeah, sorry, it's my bad. I haven't had a chance to ask, but I will. Bisan, then Evelyn.
So former State Department spokesperson Matt Miller in an interview has said that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza. And as you know, he had defended Israel when he was in his position. I think this is probably the highest official in the former Biden administration who has made this admission. Do you have a comment on that? And I mean, do you share his assessment?
Listen, maybe there may be one day when I become a former something and I'll say other things. Evelyn.
Yes, just briefly mentioned El-Fasher. Just briefly, can the UN deliver any goods, or can anyone, to Darfur?
No, we've not been able to get into El-Fasher as far as I know.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the week. Yes? No question? Okay. I'm going once, twice, sold.